Hi guys, it's Ally Gong and welcome back to my channel. I put together a video on my comprehensive foolproof study method that I applied to most of the classes that I took at UCLA to guarantee that I would pass the class against any curve under any circumstances. I know it's a really long video. I'm going to go really into depth and walk you guys through exactly how I studied, all the little details and hacks that I used as an undergraduate. Being an underclassman at UC schools, private schools too, of course, can be a very challenging process. From my personal experience, entering UCLA as a freshman, I was so overwhelmed when I first decided to become an economics major my sophomore year of college. I actually failed that very first prereq course that I took. So I had a pretty difficult process when I was first trying to get into this major and took a lot of missteps and small failures along the way before I was really able to put together a system that ensured that I passed any class. This is my bulletproof method on passing your courses. So if right now you feel like you're failing a class, this video is going to be perfect for you. The very first step of this method is to get to know the syllabus really well. In 0 week, when the teacher gives you the syllabus, look over all the required material, download everything, and just really understand the overview of the content that would be covered in that course, understand the pacing of the midterms and final schedules. At UCLA, as an econ major, we have 10-week quarters. For my econ classes, we didn't have any homework or attendance component of the grade. Our grades would be broken down into 3 midterms and 1 final or 2 midterms and 1 final. Really important to understand how many tests you're gonna have, the weight of each of those tests, and also the timeline. Knowing your syllabus really well right when you start the class is super critical. I just found my textbooks online, or older friends sometimes give me their textbook. It's totally fine to do it digitally. I would definitely get those resources as soon as you start the class. Let's get into the actual learning part. I'm going to go over the systems that I use for actually learning the material and absorbing the material. 2 things that I really relied on was this thing that I'm going to call my textbook binder and the teacher's notes as well. So these 2 are like the fundamentals of how I learned the content. I would take my own notes on the entire textbook, and I would typically do this before the lecture. Basically, as soon as the teacher gave the syllabus, I would start hammering out textbook notes that first week when not too much material has been covered. I would get through 1/3 of the entire material, all the notes done like in that first week. Normally, I would do this on my laptop. I would pull up my textbook, have it be 1/2 of my monitor. Then I would have a blank document open. I would go by chapter and label each chapter, type out each subsection of the chapter and all the titles, pull up the textbook, read the textbook, and as I was reading the textbook, whatever information stood out or that I could see being a potential test question, I would type it down. I would do this for the entire textbook. I would normally be ahead of the syllabus by a few weeks, which requires, of course, putting in more time at the beginning. Probably by halfway through the quarter, I would have all the textbook notes done, completely written out. And I would print out all these pages, double-sided, hole punch them, and I would put them in a binder. The finished outcome of this is gonna look something like this. This would be for 1 class. I would have a binder. I would leave the graph parts blank and then go in later and fill them in myself. Then I would go in with my color coding system and color code everything. The way that I used underlining, bolding, italicizing, and my color system was consistent through all my economics courses, which really helped me tie together all the concepts. I would literally read the entire textbook, take notes on the entire textbook, in addition to everything going on in lecture for every single econ class that I was in. It was literally like I need to do like everything it takes kind of mindset. So this is sort of why this is kind of like a really intense process, but I found that I really enjoyed taking my textbook notes like this. A lot of the concepts that you take for a specific classes actually tie back to like fundamental concepts that you've taken notes on before. For example, the ISLM model would come up in my elective courses. Then I could refer back to my macro notes on ISLM. I wouldn't necessarily have to retake notes for the whole theory, and I could just take notes on the insights based on that specific elective course. course, really helpful to have your own stack of notes that go over all the content that you've covered in your course. So that's one aspect of my study method. In terms of lecture material, depending on how organized and helpful your professor is, they're either going to have really digestible notes already there for you to access, and then you can just print it out. I would have my lecture notes printed out. I'd bring them to class with me.
So these are some printouts of some of my economics lectures slides. Instead of taking notes on my computer, I will actually try to just follow along with what the professor is saying and just take notes directly on these. It kind of eliminates the need for me to bring my laptop to class every day.
I'd handwrite any additional notes that the teacher added that I know is not in my textbook binder, because I study my textbook binder religiously. I would make a note on my PowerPoints. Then after the class, I would sit in my room with those printed out PowerPoints, and I'd have colored markers and start color coding those PowerPoints. I would cross-reference my lecture notes back with my textbook notes to make sure everything was consistent. So I would go through and put stars next to the information that the teacher would highlight in class. It'd be a way for me to review what went on in the class. If there was anything in the PowerPoints that I didn't understand or needed more clarification on, I would Google or Investopedia, read all the explanations and summarize it in my own words and write it on the PowerPoint so that in the future when I was studying, I could reference it really quickly. Or they just might not have any helpful notes, in which case you're going to have to make sure that you're taking the notes that you need. Normally in that case, I would just have a blank document open, not worry too much about formatting, jot down all the key concepts that the professor would talk about. I'm not one of those students that gets down every single word that the teacher says. I know that that method works for a lot of people. Probably a lot of econ majors do that, but for me, I need many iterations of that content for me to absorb it. I would always study on my own before using the textbook, and then by the time I got to lecture, it would already be the second iteration of that content being taught to me. I will just do the key takeaways, and then I would review it again. It depends on your learning style too for this. Figure out how difficult that class is going to be, and then see if you need to review material before the class, or just be present during the class, or do reviews after the class. I'm so sorry for all the trees during my 4 years of undergrad. I genuinely feel really bad about it, but and now all the resources, all lecture notes I would definitely print out. If it was a PowerPoint lecture, I would print it out so that it was 4 blocks per page. Take one color. I had a pink marker, but the pink marker, I would literally write lecture 1 practice problems, week 2 discussion practice problems. I would write it out. Every lecture note that you print out, label it out and put the chapter number and the concept, like just write it out in your marker on the top part of the page. This is chapter 9.6, specifically it's 9.6. If I had a problem with this homework set and I had labeled it 9.6, then I could go back into my binder notes and review 9.6, that subsection of the textbook. It's really good to have everything super clearly labeled out as you go. We're going to get into the actual review component because it's useless to have a ton of notes and information if you don't have a system for reviewing it and making sure that all that info is in your fantastic brain before the exam. For my textbook binder, I would read through this every day if I could. Honestly, I would just read through the entire thing. Once you have a color formatting system into place, you kind of jump to just the highlighted parts because a lot of my textbook binder notes would be explaining the theories. Once you have learned that, when you're reviewing, you're really just reviewing the formula itself or the graph itself. Really only 20% of material that you're refreshing on. It really doesn't take that long. It would probably take me 20 minutes every day to just review my textbook notes. Halfway through the quarter, I basically never have to refer to the textbook again. All the information that I would need was condensed in my textbook binder, in my own words, in my own formatting system. This is obviously more condensed than a textbook, I would hope, I believe. one component of it is learning the material and memorizing the key takeaways, but the bigger component that's going to affect your testing scores a lot more is the practice problems and applying these conceptual things that you've memorized and know really well into actual application. At the beginning of the course or as the course progressed, every practice set that the teacher or TA posted, I would print out, label using my marker. I would use an orange marker for my problem sets to make sure that I was covering everything and to also make sure that I could make note of concepts that I was struggling with. I would label the problem sets that I was working on with orange marker and label each problem number that I was working on with orange marker. Labeling all the problems that I did, especially the first time that I would go through most of the problems, it was kind of like encouragement for me to do the problems. I don't know why. A week before any midterm or test, I would start working through these problems like crazy. If we're 5 weeks into the quarter, finals are week 10, by week 5, I have all the content down for the course. Let's say I have a midterm week 7. So by the time it's week 6, I'm going to be focusing purely on the problem sets and application. For that week 7 midterm, when the teacher's teaching new material week 8, 9, 10, I've already learned most of it conceptually and I'm just really focusing on those problem sets. Basically a week before any test, I am really making sure I'm comfortable with all the problems. Really, really important to have a good grasp of practice problems if you're an econ major because that is the bulk of what you're going to be tested on. Conceptual things matter, but also if you don't know how to do the problems, you're not going to pass the class. So you really have to focus on the problem sets. This study plan system kickstarted my week of crazy studying before midterms and finals. The point of it is really just to get you in a frame of mind where you're really ready and encouraged to start drilling the review and really going 200, 300%. I would write down all the assignments that I had received and make bubbles next to them. I also liked to encourage myself on the study plan, write inspirational quotes or have a little pep talk. As I was doing the problems, I would make sure to be documenting my progress on the study plan. Up until this crazy week of intense studying, I'm staying on top of everything covered in the course. Then when this week comes, this is to make sure that I have everything down 300%, making sure that I knew these problems really well and I knew how to solve different types of problems so that when I go into the test and these curveballs are thrown, I can do well on them. Let's say you put aside 2 weeks for this upcoming final. It's a really hard class. I would recommend going through all the problems the first 3 days. Dedicate the first section of this time to working through all the problem sets. Really focus the beginning on the problems because that makes up a big set of the tests. On average, to get all those specific applications, I would work through each problem 3 times on the minimum. The first time doing a problem, I'm half learning it. If I'm not getting the right answer, then I need to go back and figure out, am I using the wrong formula? Am I using the wrong method of solving this problem? Was it like an arithmetic error? Confidence is at 20%, but that's okay because you're gonna go through each problem 3 to 5 times, so don't worry. Once I've exposed myself to all the different types of content out there, then I go back and start working them again. And this time my confidence level is gonna be at 60%. Just keep going through the problems until I felt so confident solving any type of problem. It's really important to do all the problems that you can possibly get your hands on so that you have all these different applications to reference for the final. Game theory. If they're gonna throw a random game your way with very specific conditions, if you've never done that practice problem when you're studying, It's really hard to just get it right on the final, but if you really put in the effort of going through all your discussion problems, looking through textbooks or even online problems, and you've come across that type of problem in the past, there's a lot higher chance you're gonna get it down on your final. If that problem is worth a tenth of the final, it really hurts you to not have the application down. So basically I would dedicate however many days to really just focus on the problems, focus on the math, focus on the graphs, and make sure I have that down like to a T. When I'm doing the problems, I like to use my bubbling method. This bubbling method really helps you track your progress and make sure that you're getting through the material enough times. You're just gonna make bubbles, and then each time you do the problem, you're just gonna fill in the bubble. It's really fun to fill in bubbles each time you finish a problem. Very easy visual cue. 3 or 4 days of me straight sitting there with like 30 problem sets and going through each of them. Each time I would go through one, I'd bubble it. That is my bubbling method for practice problems. I would of course try to look for practice midterms or practice finals and work through those as well. I like to save those towards the end because a lot of times those problems are going to be a lot harder, not always. As a rule of thumb, I typically always try to save my midterms and finals for the end. If you're really stretched for time, I would recommend doing the midterms and finals first and just really solidifying them. All together, after I had drilled through the problems 3 or 5 times, I would go back to my textbook binder. Before each test, I would start writing. Whatever the main concepts, formulas, graphs, theories were, I would write them. Literally, I'd go through a notebook, label out the chapter, I'd go through and just handwrite out the most important concepts from the textbook binder and from lecture notes. So then I would have a very condensed handwritten version of my textbook binder. And here is where my other 2 systems come in. My rewriting system and my sticky note-taking system. As I was going through my notes and writing down all the important parts, this is where my sticky note system comes in. This system is super great for highlighting really important information. You can sort of think of this as like making a cheat sheet for yourself of the most important highlights of the course. Have a set of sticky notes, get the most important information down. Whatever big aha concepts you have, write it on your sticky note, stick it somewhere, and then at the end of your studying session, collect all your sticky notes and start organizing them in your notebook. Based on the chapter or the concept, you can rearrange your sticky notes so that your cheat sheet makes more sense conceptually. I don't know how I started doing this, but I started doing this for one of my econ classes and it was so helpful that I just started doing this ever since. Once I had my handwritten guideline of notes, I would start rewriting them like a crazy person. Like I would just have white paper. On this white paper, I would start writing in size 6 font all the concepts. Anything that I was having trouble remembering, I would just write it down, and I would write it down like 5 or 6 times. Fill up this paper front and back. I pretty much pay no attention to the formatting. It's really just the process of rewriting, helping me ingrain the information. The first time I do my problem sets, I'll be really organized about writing out all the steps, but later as I'm reworking the problem sets, it's just like scratch paper, pieces of white paper that have every centimeter filled. This is just me writing and doing all the problems. If I'm studying the whole day, at night I'll make sure I go back and I'm reviewing the practice problems so that I don't forget the math or graphs or technical sides of the class. So it's really about combining everything. As I'm implementing all these studying methods, I'm also tracking my progress in my comprehensive study guide. That really helps keep you on track. If you're really nervous about not passing this class, or you feel like you're really struggling with the class, what I would do is like try to expand my learning as much as possible. What I mean by this is I would start looking for YouTube videos. I'd start asking friends in the major to explain the concept to me in their own words. Or I would start making posters in my room and stick them on the walls. I would put together concept maps of how all the concepts tied into place. Each test is where you're going to be learning the most and where you're going to get the most critical information to help you succeed in that course. So really treat the tests that you take as the most important learning experience. You could be doing hundreds of hours of work and you would have nothing to show for it if you don't actually get good results on your tests. After each midterm, when I was walking back to my dorm from campus, I would evaluate the test and compare it to my studying and then make notes on my iPhone about shifts that I needed to make in my studying method for the next test. If you didn't do that well on the test, it's okay. Face it courageously. Reflect with integrity how much you actually studied and how much more or less you might need to study. Note it all down so that you can do better on the next one. If you can just incrementally improve your performance from midterm 1 to midterm 2 to midterm 3 to the final, you might ace the final or do really well on your later midterms. Once the final was done, I would reflect on my studying for my entire course and evaluate what I could do better in my next econ course. Some teachers teach multiple courses in that major, so you might get them again, and those kind of notes and insights might help you on the next course. If you're doing this system, you're pretty much guaranteed to pass the class. You'll have literally covered every scenario. Always good to ask your professor or TA if you have any questions about the problem sets. The thing about this method too is doing it for online classes in college made me realize when you have this method in place that's so plug and chug and dependable, it really helps you mitigate procrastination. You just jump into this process and you start doing it. You start studying, you start learning the concepts, you start reviewing, and you're confident throughout that whole process up until the test. Before I end my video and leave you to all this crazy learning and studying, I just want to give some heart-to-heart advice. I'm giving you the resources that worked for me, and I know that if you implement them, you're going to be, based on the curve, part of that 60% that passed the class. Throughout college, I realized that life isn't always fair, and some things are not always going to be easy for everyone, and it's really easy to get discouraged, even more stressful when you're at the lower end of the curve. Hopefully this study method can really give you the confidence and the structure to tackle your classes. And I'm just saying that I'm someone who needs to study a lot, and I've come to accept that about myself throughout the years, and I think it's better to accept that and put in all the extra time and effort rather than avoiding the problem and getting lackluster results because of it. It's okay if you're not the best at something. It's okay if it requires a lot more effort on your part, but if you're willing to do it and continue to improve yourself, you will be so proud of yourself in the end for not giving up. All my best wishes to you as you go through your courses. If any of you guys try this method or implement parts of this method, let me know how it goes for you in the comments below. I'm gonna make another video going through each of my studying systems during college and why they're helpful in case you want a little more guidance on how to do these. And of course, if you liked this video, remember to like it and subscribe to my channel for more helpful videos in the future. You got this!